I never believed in curses, haunted houses, or the idea that darkness could cling to a place the way mold clings to damp wood. I thought fear was a trick of the mind, something you could turn off like a light switch if you just told yourself enough times that it wasn't real. But that was before I spent one single night inside Hollow Creek Asylum. That was before I realized that some places do not forget, and they do not forgive. It began as a dare, nothing more. My friends, always hungry for thrills, had been whispering about the old asylum for weeks. Hollow Creek had been abandoned since the late 70s after a fire tore through the east wing. The building still stood, its bricks blackened, its windows shattered, the metal gates chained but easy enough to slip through if you were determined. People in town said they heard screams there at night, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp and sudden, as if someone was being torn apart inside those walls. But of course, I laughed it off. I told them I'd prove it was nothing but wind and the imagination of bored locals. I wasn't scared, or at least, that's what I told myself. The night I went, the moon hung low, fat and orange like a lantern that had been left to burn too long. I brought only a flashlight and a recorder in case I wanted to brag later. My friends stayed behind near the old gates, unwilling to step past the threshold but eager enough to watch me go. I remember their faces, pale even in the dark, whispering to each other as I crossed into the overgrown courtyard. The grass reached my knees, brittle and whispering against my jeans as I moved. The asylum loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette of crumbling stone. Its doors were half rotted but still shut, like lips pressed together to keep a secret. When I pushed them open, the groan of rusted hinges echoed down the empty halls. It was the kind of sound that makes the back of your neck tighten. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else, something sharp and metallic that reminded me faintly of blood. My flashlight beam cut across peeling paint, long-forgotten wheelchairs, and broken gurneys. Every corner seemed to breathe. I told myself it was just the draft slipping through cracks, but the thought didn't comfort me as much as I hoped. I made my way down the main corridor. My boots crunched over scattered glass, and I found myself glancing behind me more often than I cared to admit. The silence was heavy. The kind of silence that isn't empty but filled with weight, like it's pressing against your ears. Then, faintly, I thought I heard it. The sound of footsteps that weren't mine. I froze, holding my breath. Nothing. The beam of my flashlight quivered against the wall, catching on faded murals, smiling faces painted by children who had once been patients, their innocence mocking the ruin around me. I shook my head, forcing myself to move on, though my chest was tight. I pushed deeper into the asylum, room after room revealed itself in decay, rusted bed frames, mattresses split open like corpses, black mold climbing the walls. The smell was stronger now, like copper and ash. I clicked on my recorder, speaking in a whisper that sounded far braver than I felt. "This is Hollow Creek Asylum," I said. "So far, nothing but dust, rot, and a very strong imagination. If you hear this later, remember, ghosts aren't real." As soon as I said it, I wished I hadn't, because it was then that I heard the first laugh. It was soft, almost playful, but it didn't come from my recorder. It came from the hall behind me. I whipped around, my flashlight darting wildly across the peeling walls. Nothing. Just the emptiness staring back at me. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself 100 things, but when I played the recorder back, my words were there, shaky but clear. Ghosts aren't real. And then, after a pause, the laugh. High, sharp, and close enough to make my stomach twist. I should have left. Any sane person would have. But pride is a dangerous thing, and I wasn't ready to face my friends with fear painted across my face. So I pressed forward, deeper into the asylum's heart. That's when I found the east wing. The fire had blackened it long ago, but the charred door still stood ajar. I hesitated before pushing it, the smell of smoke rising faintly from the blackened beams. The hall beyond was worse. Walls collapsed inward, ceilings open to the sky. and the floor littered with debris. My flashlight picked out something strange on the far wall. Words carved into the stone, deep and jagged as if scratched by desperate hands. Don't listen to them. The letters were long, uneven, and cut so deep that dust had settled in their grooves. I leaned closer, my breath clouding faintly in the cold air. That's when the whisper came so close it felt like it curled inside my ear. He's still here. I spun around, my light bouncing off shadows, but again nothing, just rubble and silence. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped the flashlight. I told myself I had to see this through, but every instinct screamed at me to run, and yet I didn't. Instead, I climbed the broken stairwell that led up to the asylum's second floor. Each step creaked beneath my weight, groaning as if it might give way. My breath echoed in the narrow stairwell, and I swore I could hear another set, lighter and quicker, climbing just behind me. By the time I reached the top, sweat clung to my forehead despite the cold. The second floor was worse than the first. The hall stretched long and narrow, lined with rooms whose doors stood slightly open. Each gap was a black mouth, waiting. I chose the nearest and pushed it open with trembling fingers. Inside was nothing but an overturned bed and walls streaked with soot. But when I turned to leave, I caught it in the corner of my eye. A figure standing at the far end of the hall, tall, motionless, watching. My light jerked upward, catching only emptiness. The hall was bare, but I know what I saw, and I wasn't alone anymore. My throat went dry, and for a long moment, I couldn't move. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the light, just a shadow stretched by my flashlight beam, but deep down, I knew better. That figure had been solid real. It wasn't smoke or dust. Someone, or something, had been standing there. I forced myself to keep walking, each step echoing too loud in the silence. My flashlight beam wavered across the hallway, skimming open doors that seemed to shift wider the moment I passed them. Every instinct screamed not to look inside, but curiosity is cruel. I glanced through one, and my stomach turned. The room was covered in drawings, hundreds of them. They were scratched into the walls, carved over each other in thick, jagged lines. Childlike faces, all with wide, hollow eyes and mouths frozen open. My light traced over them, and I realized the mouths weren't random shapes, they were screams. Every figure on the wall was screaming. I backed out quickly, heart pounding, and almost stumbled over a piece of wood lying in the hall. That's when I noticed it wasn't wood at all, it was a nameplate. The kind that once hung on doors. It was cracked, burned around the edges, but I could still read the faded letters. Dr. A. Kessler. I remembered that name. In town, they told stories of Dr. Kessler, the head psychiatrist, when Hollow Creek was still running. Rumors said he was cruel, that he treated his patients less like people and more like experiments. Some claimed he locked them away for weeks at a time. Others whispered that he enjoyed listening to their screams. No one ever proved anything. But when the fire destroyed the asylum, his body was never found. Some said he died there, trapped in the East Wing. Others said he survived, wandering into the woods and disappearing forever. But standing there in that hallway, with the nameplate heavy in my hands, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe he never left at all. A sound cut through my thoughts. A scraping, slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging across stone. It came from the room just ahead. My body froze, but my legs betrayed me, carrying me forward step by step. When I reached the door, I hesitated, listening. The scraping stopped. I swallowed hard, pushed the door open, and shone my flashlight inside. The room was empty. At least, it should have been. On the far wall, fresh words were being etched into the plaster as I watched. The letters formed one at a time, slow and jagged, though no hand touched them. My breath caught as the message spelled itself out. "You shouldn't be here." I staggered back, my light shaking so badly it made the words ripple across the wall. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The air grew heavier, colder, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe. And then came the footsteps. Not echoes, not tricks of sound. Real footsteps, steady and deliberate, moving toward me. From the end of the hall, I raised the flashlight again, forcing myself to look. There he was, tall, thin, a man in a scorched lab coat, the fabric blackened and torn. His face was half-shadowed, but what I could see was burned, twisted, skin melted into a permanent snarl. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they glowed faintly, like embers that refused to die. I stumbled backward, crashing into the doorframe. My flashlight flickered once, twice, then steadied again. The figure didn't move quickly. He just stood there, staring at me, his head tilting slightly, as though studying me the way a doctor studies a specimen. My heart thundered in my chest. Every part of me screamed to run, but my legs felt locked. I gripped the recorder in my hand like it was a weapon, my voice cracking as I whispered, "Who are you?" The figure didn't speak, but the recorder did. The static hissed, and then a voice, low, guttural, too close to be coming from a machine, growled back, "You know me." The recorder slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. The voice didn't stop. Over and over, it repeated in a chant that rattled the walls. "You know me! You know me! You know me!" That broke me. I bolted down the hall, my boots slamming against the rotted wood. Doors banged open as I passed, each revealing flashes of horror faces in shadows, hands reaching out, screams trapped in the walls. The air was alive with whispers now, all of them clawing at me, urging me to stop, to listen, to stay. But I didn't stop. I didn't dare. By the time I reached the stairwell, I was gasping for breath. I glanced back once, just once, and saw him standing at the far end of the hall, unmoving, watching. And though the whispers were loud, though the recorder still hissed on the floor behind me, his silence was the worst sound of all. I tore down the stairs, through the ruined lobby, and out into the night. The cold air hit me like a wave, and for a second, I thought I was free. My friends were gone, they'd gotten scared and left, but the gates still stood open, the night still stretched wide, and I ran until my lungs burned. But even as I ran, I knew one thing. I hadn't escaped. Not really, because as I stumbled into the streetlights at the edge of town, the recorder buzzed faintly in my pocket. I hadn't even realized I'd scooped it up in my panic. I pulled it out, my hands trembling, and pressed play. At first, only static. Then my voice, shaky, whispering into the silence, "Who are you?" And then, that same voice again, darker, closer, almost breathing against my ear. "You know me." I dropped it onto the pavement, but the words followed me home. And even now, sitting in the safety of my room, I swear I hear them still. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing at the end of that hallway, head tilted, burned skin twisting into something like a smile. And when sleep finally did claim me for a few minutes, it wasn't peaceful. I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the sound of his voice still clawing through my skull. "You know me." I told myself it was all in my head, that I'd let fear twist shadows into something worse than they were. But that recorder sitting on my desk said otherwise. I hadn't thrown it away. I should have. I wanted to, but some part of me couldn't let it go. I kept staring at it, as if the little box might give me answers. By morning, I convinced myself to play it back again. My hands shook as I pressed play. Static. My breathing. My own trembling question. "Who are you?" And then, the voice. But this time, it didn't say, "You know me." It said my name. Clear. Harsh. Like a growl dragged across broken glass. "Daniel." I froze. My full name wasn't anywhere on that recorder. I hadn't spoken it. None of my friends had used it. So how? I slammed the button to stop, heart hammering so loud I thought I'd pass out. For the rest of the day, I avoided the recorder, but I couldn't avoid the dread coiling in my gut. That night, I tried to distract myself with TV. I turned every light in the apartment on, pulled the curtains tight, tried to pretend the world outside didn't exist. For a while, it worked, until the power went out. Not a flicker, not a surge. Everything died at once. The lamps, the TV, the hum of the fridge. Darkness swallowed the room, thick and absolute. And then I heard it, the scrape, that same slow, deliberate scrape of fingernails across plaster. Only this time it was inside my apartment. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it around. The beam cut through the dark, trembling over walls and furniture. The sound stopped, but on the wall, near my bedroom door, fresh words had appeared, scratched deep into the paint, gouged into the wood beneath. "Welcome home." My throat locked. I stumbled backward, bumping into the couch, nearly dropping my phone, and then footsteps. From the hallway, slow, measured, coming closer. I wanted to run, but where? Out into the night. With him waiting? Stay here? With him inside? My mind screamed for escape, but my body felt frozen, trapped in that heavy air. The footsteps reached the doorway. My phone light flickered, sputtered, then steadied again. Nothing. The hall was empty. I thought maybe I'd lost it completely, until I looked down. On the floor, just beyond the doorway, something waited for me. A piece of paper, folded neatly in half. I crouched, hands shaking, and picked it up. Inside, scrawled in jagged black ink, were 3 words. "Look behind you." I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I ran. I tore out of that apartment, down the stairs, into the cold night air. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. But when the engine roared to life, relief flooded me. I drove with no destination, just away. Away from the apartment, away from the asylum, away from him. The city blurred by, neon and concrete, melting into streaks of light. But as I drove, the radio crackled. It wasn't on. The screen was dark, but from the speakers came static, then a voice, low and ragged. "You can't run, Daniel." I nearly swerved off the road. My chest was tight, every nerve screaming, but I forced myself to keep driving. I didn't know where I was going until I saw the sign. Hollow Creek, 5 miles. The asylum. Every sane part of me begged not to go back, but another part, the part that couldn't stand not knowing, steered me right back to the place I'd sworn I'd never see again. The gates were still open, the night still heavy. My headlights swept across the ruined facade, the broken windows gaping like open mouths. And yet, as I stepped out of the car, the place didn't feel abandoned. Not anymore. It felt waiting. I gripped my flashlight tight and stepped inside. The air was colder now, sharp enough to sting my lungs. My boots crunched over broken glass and ash. Whispers swelled in the silence, soft at first, then rising until they filled the halls. They weren't all the same voice. Some were high, some low, some fractured by sobs. But together they formed a single, awful message. "Help us." I staggered forward, following the sound. It led me to the east wing, the part of the asylum most damaged by the fire. The walls were blackened, the ceiling collapsed in places, the floor littered with burned hospital beds and melted restraints. In the center of the room stood a single chair, intact, untouched by fire, a leather restraint chair, its straps stiff and cracked with age. And sitting in that chair was a file folder. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but my hands moved on their own, reaching for it. The folder was old, the paper inside yellowed, but still legible. Patient files, dozens of them. And on the first page, written in neat, precise script, was a name I knew too well. Mine. Daniel Reeves. Male. Age 32. Subject exhibits signs of paranoia, delusions, and escalating hysteria. Believes himself to be free. Requires further study. The page slipped from my fingers. My pulse roared in my ears. How could my name be here, in records older than I was? Footsteps echoed behind me. Slow, patient, familiar. I turned, and there he was again. Dr. Kessler. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, the burned shadows of patients filled the room. Hollow-eyed, skin blistered and blackened. Their mouths opened in silent screams, and every one of them turned toward me. I ran. I don't know how I made it out, but somehow I stumbled into the night again, the file folder clutched tight in my hand. I didn't look back until I reached the car. And even then, I wished I hadn't, because through the shattered windows of the asylum, I saw dozens of eyes glowing faintly in the dark, watching, waiting. And above them all, Dr. Kessler stood at the broken doorway, his head tilted, his burned lips curling into a smile. I drove until the asylum was nothing but a memory in my rearview mirror. But the file folder still sits in my passenger seat, its weight pressing into me like a stone. I don't want to open it again. I don't want to see what else is inside. But I know I will. Because I can't stop now. And somewhere deep down, I think that's exactly what he wants. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of that file folder pressing down on me. I didn't dare open it, but I couldn't throw it away either. It sat on my desk, its faded cover a constant reminder that whatever was happening to me wasn't just in my head. My name was written there, in neat black ink, like I had been part of Hollow Creek long before I was even born. By the third night, exhaustion won. I must have drifted off at my desk, because when I woke, the folder was open. I swear on my life, I never touched it. Pages were spread across the table, each one filled with case notes. Some were about patients I didn't know, their names scribbled next to words like violent tendencies, schizophrenia, treatment ongoing. But in the middle of the stack, there were more files pages with my name written at the top. Dozens of them. And as I read, my heart turned to ice. Each entry was dated, and each date lined up with the worst moments of my life. When my father left, when my mother passed away, when my first relationship fell apart, when I dropped out of college. Every tragedy, every collapse, every broken piece of me was documented here as if someone had been watching, recording, studying, and every note ended with the same phrase: subject remains under observation. I shoved the papers back into the folder, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I knew what it meant. It meant that whatever was haunting me wasn't random. I wasn't just some unlucky guy who wandered into a cursed asylum. No, I'd been part of this all along. But how? I didn't want to believe it, but the answer came faster than I expected. That night, my phone rang. No caller ID. I shouldn't have answered, but my hand moved before I could stop it. Daniel, the voice rasped. Kessler, you're late for your appointment. My throat went dry. What do you want from me? To remember, he said. His tone was calm, almost gentle. You've run long enough. Come home. The line went dead. I don't know why, but I didn't call the police. What would I say? That a ghost doctor from a burned-out asylum had been stalking me? That I had patient files with my name in them dated decades before I was born? They'd lock me up faster than Kessler ever could. But I couldn't ignore the call. Not anymore. So I drove. The asylum loomed against the horizon like a scar that refused to fade. I pulled through the rusted gates, headlights sweeping across crumbling stone. This time, I didn't hesitate. I killed the engine, grabbed the folder, and stepped inside. The air was colder than ever. Each breath stung like knives in my chest, but the silence was gone. Now, The asylum pulsed with sound-distant whispers, echoes of screams, the dragging of chains across concrete. I followed the noise deeper, past the burned halls, until I reached a part of the asylum I'd never seen before. A door stood there, perfectly intact, the paint unburned, the handle gleaming as though polished yesterday. Above it, a brass plaque read, "Observation Ward." My hands trembled as I pushed it open. Inside, rows of rooms lined the corridor, each one with a narrow window in the door. I forced myself to look inside the first, and nearly collapsed. It was me, sitting on a bed, eyes hollow, skin pale. My double lifted his head and stared right at me. Then his lips moved, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Shaking, I stumbled to the next door. Another version of me, this one strapped to a chair, thrashing against restraints. His mouth was wide open in a silent scream, his face twisted in terror. Every door I passed showed another me, hundreds of them, each broken, tortured, lost. I ran. My footsteps echoed like gunshots. My breath came ragged and shallow, but no matter how far I went, the hallway stretched on endlessly, lined with doors that all contained me. Finally, I fell to my knees, and that's when I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Kessler. He stepped into view, his burned face illuminated by a faint glow. His skin hung in tatters, but his eyes, God, his eyes were alive. Cold, sharp, and full of something worse than malice. "Do you see now?" he asked softly. His voice carried down the endless hall, each word echoing like a hammer blow. "You've always been mine. Every path you've walked, every pain you've endured, I have shaped it. You are not living. You are remembering." I shook my head. "No, that's impossible. I'm real." "Real." His laugh was a dry rasp. "Reality is only what I allow you to perceive. You are one patient among many, an experiment, and it is time to conclude your study." The doors around us began to rattle. Hands pounded against glass. My own faces screaming silently to be let out. The air grew thick with the weight of it, the smell of smoke and ash rising. I stumbled back, clutching the folder. "Why me? Why all of this?" "Because you asked to forget," Kessler said, tilting his head. "And I was kind enough to oblige. But every memory erased must return. That is the law. That is the balance." The folder grew hot in my grip. Pages fluttered loose, whipping into the air like wings. Each page showed my face, my life, my choices, and each one burned to ash before my eyes. I realized then this wasn't about fear, it was about control. He fed on it, thrived on it. The more I believed him, the stronger he became. So I did, the only thing I could. I let go. The folder slipped from my hands and hit the floor. The papers ignited, flames racing up in a sudden burst of light. The fire spread fast, leaping from wall to wall, devouring the endless corridor. Kessler's eyes widened. For the first time, I saw something in his face that wasn't control. It was rage. "No!" he roared, his burned features twisting. "You cannot destroy what you are!" But I stood my ground. The flames surged higher, swallowing the rooms, the doubles of myself, the endless halls. Kessler lunged toward me, his charred hand reaching, and then I woke. I was lying on the ground outside the asylum, the morning sun blinding my eyes. The building stood behind me, charred and silent, just as it always had. No whispers, no footsteps, no Kessler. The folder was gone. For the first time in weeks, I felt air fill my lungs without weight pressing against me. But deep down, I know it isn't over. I see shadows shift when I close my eyes. I hear faint whispers when the world goes quiet. Kessler is gone, but not destroyed. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm half asleep, I hear that voice again. "You know me. and I wonder if he's right. Maybe I never left that asylum. Maybe I never will.